Potential pitfalls in the NFC East. The Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles, Washington Commanders. What are these teams up to this year? New York Giants, what could derail those teams in 2024? And we got some new Hall of Fame candidates who are up for potential enshrinement next year. On today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you're subscribed up on YouTube or everywhere you listen to this podcast. And even some of the everydayers out there, Matt, are not subscribed. So hit that subscribe button and you'll know when there's a new pod available for you here 5 times a week at Peacock and Williamson on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode of PNW is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, here we go. Let's get into the NFC East, our series of division by division pitfalls that teams need to avoid. Some teams it'll be easier than others to avoid these pitfalls. Some of these pits to fall into quite large, Matt, in the NFL. Some a little bit narrower. So let's go through what could derail the seasons of each team in the NFC East on today's show. We're going to talk about some new Hall of Fame class nominees a little bit later too, and we're going to have some stacked classes coming up here in years. For a little while here, and so some tough voting will be happening there. But let's start in the NFC East. Let's go to the top, and I want to actually go to the Philadelphia Eagles first because they're a team that I have no idea what to expect from them. They were the best team in the NFL for 18 months. Then they fell off a cliff. They've changed offensive and defensive coordinators twice in a row. And now the latest reports this week out of Philly is that there's some leadership questions, and Sirianni and his quarterback, Jalen Hurts, might not see eye to eye. And it sounds a lot like the situation with the last quarterback there. And so who's the constant? It's not the quarterback. So I don't know what to expect from this football team. And it feels like they're on the precipice of either falling apart or being right back at the 1 seed of the NFC again.
Yeah, and I'm feeling strong about their chances, and I think their division isn't as difficult as it looks, and we're going to get into all these teams, of course. But I do think you have a head coach that's been successful, that is on the hot seat, and that's the Eagle fans aren't exactly the most forgiving in the world. They booed Santa Claus and, things like that. I mean, it could go bad quickly after the bad taste in their mouth, the way that the season finished. I do think this quarterback situation overall could get a little dicey. He's a certain type of quarterback that needs to play a certain way, and he also played through some injuries, to back him up here a little bit. And if him and the head coach aren't on the same page, that's problematic. I also think, not that he would be a bad player, but I could see the Saquon Barkley experiment not working. And folks, I'm trying to look at these situations all in a half-empty manner. You know what I mean? Bad things are going to happen. It's real easy to be optimistic.
Yeah, it's also the thing to avoid for teams. There's parity reigns still in the NFL. And on our last mailbag, Matt, we talked about teams that could go worst to first, and it can flip quickly for the good or for the bad. And something that seems small to start the year can become very big. And even beyond injuries, which we're trying to not really talk about that much because obviously injuries can derail just about any team if the wrong players get hurt with the wrong injuries. But there's a number of things that can happen in the NFL when 1 or 2 wins can suddenly take you out of contention. If you have a competitive conference, you could all of a sudden be a 10-win team or not a playoff team with 2 more losses on your schedule.
We know this league, things can snowball, and they did for the Eagles last year. It got worse and worse and worse. There were some schematic advantages teams found that they couldn't deal with. I mean, the blitz pickup stuff was bad, et cetera. The defense looked problematic in a lot of places. But why I mentioned Barkley is if Hurts, like a lot of running quarterbacks, doesn't throw much to the backs, and you have a running game that you don't need a great back, or in Barkley bounces things as he's been known to do. I mean, maybe just don't max it. Maybe that's not a great fit. I mean, I'm reaching a little bit. I think this is a good team. Rookie corners, and I'm going to mention this with the Lions too. I mean, I like all those prospects that the Lions and Eagles drafted high, but rookie corners get picked on. And very few rookie corners have good years and are the answer to the problem right off the bat. We already know, the way this team's makeup and roster building is, they don't stress the middle of the field at all, linebackers and safeties. So you're kind of holding on for dear life there. And I also have a little bit of question. All these unbelievable Georgia defensive prospects, have they really lived up to it? Or is it a group of piranhas in Georgia that just out-athlete everybody and first on the ball tears apart the prey, as opposed to standing on their own?
And it's a new generation of players from a different school. We've seen the same thing happen at Alabama, where when you get all these athletes together, they just destroy people. And you get them away from their dominating team into the NFL, where again there's more parity, and all of a sudden on their own they don't look quite as good as they did before. And some of them turn out to be stars, and then some of them turn out to be duds. And so, which are those? And we haven't really seen what they're going to be yet with those Georgia guys, and they still look like they probably will be studs, but maybe they start to look more like duds, or maybe they just aren't quite the dominating
translate as well,
pieces that we thought they might have been. And I look at the offense too, and this is almost becoming a little bit of a as far as team building goes, a little bit of a Rams stars and scrubs, not quite to the degree the Rams were when they won a Super Bowl. And obviously it worked out great, and then they fell apart quickly. But they're still a competitive team, I think, there. But you got a guy like 6th round rookie, 6'6" wide receiver, Johnny Wilson. He's running as the number 3 wide receiver right now with the starters when they go 3 wide in camp. So, that's, you're teetering on, the wrong players get injured, and this isn't about injuries, but there's a lot of studs on this roster, but depth, you're going to have to start calling on some guys too if the wrong guys do get hurt.
And 2 coordinator changes sound great, but are they? And back to the Georgia thing, look at Nick Saban offensive linemen at Bama that were drafted really high. A lot of misses. I mean, to the point where you have to be like, maybe this is a trend. And these Georgia defenders are great combine guys, and collectively they're awesome in the SEC. But are they good pros? I just don't know. I'm not saying yes or no.
Moving on to who do you want to do next? The Dallas Cowboys. They're a team that's almost opposite for me, because you know how we know exactly what they're going to be? Because they haven't changed anything, Matt. The Dallas Cowboys, as long as they get CeeDee Lamb signed and in the building, I mean, that holdout is still ongoing as we record this podcast. But this is the exact team, really, minus Zeke Elliott coming back, that they ended the season with last year.
Yeah, and my Steelers are doing this too, but trusting 2 rookies on the offensive line to basically be starters could absolutely go wrong. And it doesn't even sound like those guys are grabbing that job yet. I could see this being one of the worst running games in the league. And that's an awful lot to ask out of Dak, Lamb, and okay pass catchers after that. It's not the Niners group of pass catchers. It's not the Dolphins group of pass catchers outside the number 1 guy. And I thought their run defense was really bad last year. And why would it be better? I think Zimmer's a really good coordinator, and that could, work out in a good way. But are they that stout up the middle? I don't know.
Next, I'm going to ask you a specific question about the Dallas Cowboys that pertains to pitfalls they need to avoid in 2024. We'll talk Commanders, we'll talk New York Giants, and we'll talk about the next Hall of Fame class, some new names and new candidates that are up for potential Hall of Fame enshrinement next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals, and you want to find professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find those professionals, the right professionals for your team, and not only find them, but find them faster and find them for free, which is good for your small business. LinkedIn isn't just some regular old job board either. In fact, there's so many people on LinkedIn. We're talking about billions with a B that are on LinkedIn already that aren't even looking for jobs. 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those that aren't actively looking for a job, but might be open to the perfect role. And that role might be your role with your small business. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours at LinkedIn. So hire professionals like a professional. And LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats that they might not have the time or resources to hire. So constantly finding new ways to make the process easier and more streamlined to help you find the right candidates to fill those positions at your small business. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So as it pertains to the Dallas Cowboys, Matt, and you start to look at this roster, and we've talked about some of the things that they have going for them, some of the things that they don't have going for them, is CeeDee Lamb, is it so dependent on Dak to CeeDee Lamb that it can't possibly work, is my question. Because he's already missed part of camp. So do you start slow there? He already had 180 targets last year. He's going to have 200 targets this year. If, like you said, the running game's not quite ready to go and you have even more third and longs, is Dak Prescott need to throw into tighter windows? Does he end up throwing more interceptions with more third and longs? And that's kind of dogged him sometimes throughout his career in certain seasons. So that's kind of where I'm at with the Dallas Cowboys team. They're certainly not better than they were. And I think everything just kind of becomes magnified, and it's so dependent on Dak to CD. And I don't really know what the plan is, because, and if you sign both of them long term, and I'm kind of talking about beyond 2024 now too, but if you sign both of them long term, and obviously there's no way you can let someone like Micah Parsons go, so you got to sign him too. How else do you find space in the cap to upgrade the rest of your roster? So it's just going to be Dak chucking it to CeeDee Lamb every down for the next 5 years.
So first off, remember, these are human beings, and you have locker rooms, and 3 massive contracts looming could become very distracting. Like off the field and interpersonal relationships within the team and between coaches and owners and all that stuff too. That could be a distraction. And we know it's a huge media market and America's team and all that too. And I love your point about not concerned about Dak. I'm not concerned about Lamb. I'm not concerned about Dak to Lamb. But passing games are the most important thing on a team, on the field, is an offensive passing attack. And it's really dependent on 2 guys whose contracts are up. You know what I mean? Like, Brandon Cooks isn't going to get any better. Ferguson's just a guy,
Yeah, and like, it feels like with the comments from Jerry Jones, and I know we're spending a lot of time and we've got to move on to some other teams here, but the comments from Jerry Jones, they're all in this year. It feels like it's almost like a little bit of a pressure, walls closing in, such a tight view, such a constricted view of you have to win this year, and Dak's playing for a contract, and it's a narrow needle to thread, I feel like, for the Dallas Cowboys this year. It feels a little tight.
And I hate to say this, but I mean, their owner isn't like any other. He has radio shows and he meddles. And like all of us, I hope I get to be his age, but you start to get a little crazy at that age.
Yeah. And so it's like, well, what do you
tell them? No.
You have to win a Super Bowl or they're going to blow it up? Like, what's going on here? I don't know.
Might get a little deranged, I mean, like, you get old and who's going to tell you no? He's the Mad King,
Things have already been blown up in Washington. New ownership, new GM, new coaching staff. I do feel like there's very good vibes with the Washington Commanders going into 2024. They found themselves a new quarterback in Jaden Daniels. Expectations aren't high. This is a rebuilding team. But you do feel like the ship has turned in the right direction. Yeah, I'm a little skeptical of Cliff Kingsbury, but I do think the fit with Kingsbury and Daniels could be interesting, and how this all comes together. McLaurin and Dotson. And they've got a multi-headed monster at running back with Eckler and Brian Robinson. We'll see how the the offensive line does for this football team. And we've mentioned in previous pods, they have no outside pass rush to speak of, but they've got, Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne and the rookie Johnny Newton inside. It's a really good group of interior offensive linemen. In fact, I think probably Johnny Newton's going to have to see some defensive end snaps this year as a rookie just to get the best 11 on the field on defense. But I've got some questions on the back end as well. So I think expectations aren't high. So if expectations aren't really high, what could derail the Washington Commanders this year?
See, I think the goals are different for the Eagles and the Commanders, of course. Like, to me, what you need to accomplish is pour a little bit of a foundation. The quarterback and coach are very important, of course, but we need to finally build positivity, a winning culture, and that's not going to happen quick at all. I mean, it just isn't. And if by chance things go astray and you don't make step one of building a culture in the 2023 season, that derailed things. Not like what would derail them not to get the playoffs. I don't know how they can get to the playoffs almost. I mean, their offensive line, their once impressive group of edge pass rushers are amongst the worst in the league, in my opinion. And those positions aren't walking through that door anytime soon. I mean, Russ Grimm and Joe Jacoby aren't walking through that door anytime soon. So they have a lot of roster building stuff to do that is going to derail them. But I hope it doesn't derail them from making step one of building the program.
To put it simply, it's all about the quarterback. Don't ruin him. That's the only rule in 2024. Don't ruin Jane Daniels.
Yep. And hopefully he looks like he belongs. Doesn't have to be great.
The pitfalls for the New York Giants are somewhat easier, I think, for the bad teams.
I'm having a tough time for them.
Well, the pitfalls here are don't get fired if you're Brian Daboll and Joe Shane. Maybe that's the it is.
And I don't know that Hard Knocks did them a lot of good publicity either.
No,
in the biggest market in the world.
Zero teams are going to want to be on the off-season version of that show, but that's why I love it as a fan. I loved that insight, and it made me pull my hair out. Because, when people always tell us, Matt, maybe we're a little critical of a team or something after the draft. I don't know why they did this. And, you'll get the people, the keyboard warriors and all caps will be like, I think they know more than you do. They run the team. Why don't you apply for GM job or whatever? And they tell us these things. And then you hear some of the things that they do and you get a little look inside and you're like, these are human beings too. These aren't like sentient beings sent down from another planet that are that much smarter than everybody else that are running these football teams. They're human beings too, and they make mistakes. And when you hear some of the, and I think and I'll go to my grave with this, Matt. I think Matt Williamson, GM, Brian Peacock, assistant GM, we could at least just straight up drafting, maybe not, we would need some help as far as contracts and it takes a lot of people in a front office, but we could out GM NFL teams that have existed in the last few years since we've been doing this podcast, and maybe current teams as well. They are not perfect and they do make mistakes. And I don't think they want those mistakes ever to be seen in the light of day. And especially like when you see the NFL draft and no team ever wants people to see their draft board after the draft. Why not? Who cares? The draft's already over. It doesn't matter, but they don't want that stuff leaked out at all. Not because of competitive advantage, because they don't want to look stupid.
Yeah. And you also don't want your first round pick to be, when you take him at 12, your 12th ranked guy. You like 11 guys better than me. And you told me you only liked a couple. You know what I mean? Like it's like arbitration in baseball, from what I understand. Like it's kind of cruel. Or these are all the red flags we had on you. Like we think you might be an alcoholic and the pedophile.
You don't want to see what is for you. It was like, well, hey, coach, why did I have the character flag next to me?
Well, we got some concerns about you, Sonny boy, but you're really fast.
Every other team did too, buddy. Like that's probably what the conversation would be like. You got arrested 6 times, man. I mean, you know what I mean? Like
yeah. If he didn't, we weren't doing our job.
Yeah.
So all that aside, keeping your jobs. This one, is it just as easy? And I'm surprised you didn't mention his name because I know you're not big on him, and I'm not either. But Daniel Jones. Is that too easy for our exercise that we just found out he's not the answer? But some ways that would be a good problem because we're not stuck in the bad marriage. We identified that he is the problem and we can move on now.
That's a
Not
great
the end
point.
of the world.
Yeah,
Right.
I didn't think of it that way. The biggest pitfall is something that they haven't been able to figure out, and it might be talking ownership into realizing what is not
I have
working.
some questions about ownership there too, by the way.
It does feel like ownership likes Daniel Jones more than anybody else in the world.
They aren't the Parcells group of owners, bigger, stronger. We're the Giants, and we're giant people that are all about size, speed. Like that used to be that team in the 80s more than anything in the league. We're about size, speed, physicality. We'll figure everything else out. They don't have that identity anymore.
I do think there's a chance that Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau are nightmares for teams.
Me too. With Lawrence up the middle.
That's where this team has to win. So if
Neighbors might be rookie of the year.
Where things get derailed is if they're losing games like 12-9, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of like the thing they have to avoid. The offense has to be good enough to where if the defense gets off the field on third downs, go score some stinking points.
I think their roster is a little bit better than given credit for. I think both lines of scrimmage are a little bit better than people think. I know like Illuminor and Runyon aren't household names, but they're a lot better than what they played with last year. Now I think they have a group of wide receivers. If Neighbors is the star we think he is, that's respectable. I don't think the back seven of the Giants defense is horrendous. You know what I mean? Like for as many games as they've lost in the last decade or 5 years or whatever, I think there's some good things here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just skeptical. There's no Saquon Barkley to lean on, and their best offenses since Daniel Jones has been there is when Barkley's healthy and playing at a high level. Mm-hmm. So what does that look like? And I'm skeptical there.
I know running backs don't matter, but it would sure be nice to have a good back to lean on, considering
just more weapons. So your quarterback that I don't think he can do it by himself doesn't have to try to do it by himself.
Mm-hmm. Be a nice crutch.
As you can tell, I'm not that high on the New York Giants this year, so I apologize, Giants fans.
I'm not either, but I also think Dayball's not a terrible head coach, and I might look at their over/under number and go over.
The Daniel Jones thing sticks with me. They needed to figure that out a lot sooner. They're going too slow with getting things going in the right direction. I think.
Last thing, I guess, is kind of, in terms of decision making, if we look at the ladder as ownership, front office, coach, I'm more worried about the first two rungs than the last one.
Yes, and it might be too late.
And
then Dayball's,
sacrificial lamb, right?
Yeah, sacrificial lamb for it because they can't figure out what's going on.
But what if they hire Belichick next year?
Yeah, well, hey,
and to do it all,
I would not be shocked at all.
That's not crazy. Yeah.
Next, let's talk Hall of Famers up for nomination in 2025. Some new names on the list, some pretty darn good names on the list. Who's in, who's out for Peacock and Williamson next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier, and prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for baseball games, football games, concerts, comedy shows, theater events, and you can even get tickets not only up to the moment the event starts, you can even get tickets up to an hour after an event starts and save a whole bunch of money. There's flash deals, exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of a game or an event. You can save even more with zone deals when you choose a section, let Game Time choose the seats. And all-in pricing, no surprise fees at checkout. So many ways to save and get those tickets, whether it's early or last minute at Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Hall of Famers. How should we do this? Let's go through the list just to kind of get everybody ready for the next ballot as it pertains to Hall of Famers in the 2025 class. We've just heard the speeches from the 2024 class, and it's always fun to see those guys. And even if you're like, this player does or doesn't deserve to be in a Hall, and everyone kind of feels differently about the Hall of Fame, no matter who gets in, it's always great to hear those speeches and how much it means to a lot of folks. So here are the notable.
Real quick before the names, if you don't mind, I want to throw one thing out there.
Yeah.
Again, this is ugliest girl to beauty pageant type thing, but I thought this past class was particularly weak. the one that just got in, which grinds my gears even more than Antonio Gates wasn't part of it as a first time. I mean, he can't be a first time Hall of Fame, ballot Hall of Fame. So dumb to me.
And one of the problems with the Hall for me, and we when we talk about this, everyone knows I'm a small Hall guy. It's like if you have a conversation about it, that means they're not a Hall of Famer to me. But the funnel is wrong. And every sport has this thing. Baseball, you can only vote for 10 guys, whatever. Only 5 guys can get in the Hall for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. If only 2 guys should get in, put in 2. If 8 belong in, put in 8. So that's a huge flaw for me for the Hall of Fame.
Agreed. I do think there's some process issues, but let's dig into these names. I think there's some good ones in this one.
Okay, so of the names we're going to talk about, Luke Kuechly, Eli Manning, Earl Thomas, Marshawn Lynch, Adam Vinatieri, Clay Matthews, Terrell Suggs, Joe Staley, Vernon Davis, Aqib Talib, Ryan Khalil, and Marshall Yanda. Those are the names we're going to focus on here. Those are the, as the Hall of Fame put it out themselves, I think it is, or maybe the 33rd team put this out. The most notable Hall of Fame candidates for the upcoming class.
Let me get good.
I see one lock for me personally.
Me too.
Out of that group. And I think a lot of these guys are going to get in. They all have, there's a lot of guys with a great case. I only see one lock, but again, I'm a small Hall guy. And I think there's one name that's going to be the most talked about, which is the most fun. For me, he's not a lock, but I think he actually will be a lock to get in. And that's Eli Manning, but he's not my lock.
Okay. I want to start with Eli and Vinatieri because I think both those guys are going. I don't condone it, especially with Vinatieri. I know he made some huge kicks with the Patriots and et cetera, but I think he just lasted forever at a position that doesn't beat your body up. And I don't even think he was the kickoff guy for the Colts. Justin Tucker's the only kicker you're going to get my condone. Not Vinatieri. They're not close to me.
And he made some really big kicks. And
a long time ago,
kicker and everyone knows your name. That's pretty cool. There's just a special teams wing. I think he's probably just as deserving as Devin Hester, but I didn't think Devin Hester belonged in either. And so, he wouldn't get my vote, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if he gets in because when you play and win a bunch of Super Bowls, make a bunch of big kicks, PR is a big part of this, like the marketing of it. I think Marshawn Lynch, perfect example. I think Marshawn Lynch, he's does so much off the field and makes so many headlines and everyone loves him. Like, look at Marshawn Lynch doing this crazy thing now. Marshawn Lynch on his play alone is not a Hall of Famer, even though he's really good. And like all these guys are up for the Hall because they're good. Like this isn't me saying that players aren't good. We're talking about the Hall of Fame. And so for me, no way does Marshawn Lynch get in, but he's so popular that he might get enough votes.
I'll get to Lynch in a minute. I want to finish up on Eli. Most of his years, he was the 8th to 10th best quarterback in the league. I mean, he has a lot of very okay years, not even Pro Bowl type years. But I know he's going, and I'm not even going to fight it because 2 Super Bowl wins, the last name, public notoriety, Big Apple. So he's going. He wouldn't get my vote over Phillip Rivers, though.
Right. Yeah, his career, but those 2 seasons is what everything's going to be built on. 2 rings. It's going to be hard to keep him out. I don't know if he gets in immediately or not, but he'll get into the Hall. Eli Manning will be a Hall of Famer. Wouldn't be in my small Hall. He
would be like my favorite Hall of Fame quarterback to play against.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Eli's coming down. That's fine.
Eli. And he was phenomenal in those 2 seasons. And I think there's you're discrediting him in some ways because of his regular seasons and what he did in the non-Super Bowl runs. I mean, he beat the undefeated Patriots team. I mean, those are really cool seasons, but I don't think you should get in based on 2 seasons, even if you win the championship in those 2 seasons.
Yeah. As for Lynch, I agree with you. I think he's very borderline. The worst, I'm putting that in quotes, recent running backs, in my opinion, are like Terrell Davis, Curtis Martin, Jerome Bettis. I know that's sacrilege here in Pittsburgh, but I think Lynch is in that neighborhood. I mean, really hard to play against, but he's not.
I'd rank him below all those guys too.
Yeah, and I could understand that.
Even if we're in the same tier, I think he's after those tier.
Okay. We agree Keuchly's the biggest lock of the group.
He's the lock. Keuchly's the lock for me. Yeah,
I would assume so. I think he's almost Ray Lewis level, like linebackers we've seen lately.
And we've seen them all get in. Like Patrick Willis got in. Keuchly right there. Like those were the guys. It was Lewis, then it was Willis, then it was Keuchly. Best in the league.
I'm sure you have great respect for Joe Staley and Vernon Davis, but I think those two, Khalil, Talib, and Matthews, are no's for me.
Right. Like Vernon Davis is a really good player, but he's not even like a Ring of Honor player for the teams he played on. You know,
like
Joe
Staley should be a Ring of Honor guy.
Yeah, the Staley's a Ring of Honor guy for the 49ers, and it's phenomenal. But you know, he's a Hall of very good, and you love him locally, and he's not a Hall of Famer, but awesome career. You know, and all these guys, again, I'll say awesome career, even though maybe I don't know if they're a Hall of Famer. I think the guy who has the best case that probably has the worst PR is Marshall Yanda.
Me too. I was about to say the same thing. If he wasn't a guard, I thought he was a great player for a decade. I mean, one of the best guards in the league, and a force on a good team. You know, paving the way for big time running games. And I think there's guards in the hall that are lesser players or lesser careers than Yanda.
And if I'm voting, he probably gets my second place vote after Keuchly on this.
Okay. List. And I think Suggs has a really strong case. A real force on phenomenal Ravens defenses. I mean, gets a little overshadowed by Lewis and Reed, but man, I mean, I think he has as strong a case as most edge rushers that have gone in lately.
Suggs over Matthews for the edge guys?
Easily, in my opinion. Yeah. And then the last one I'll talk about is Earl Thomas, because he actually reminds me of his former teammate, Russell Wilson, where there was a stage late in their career where I thought, if they quit today, they're Hall of Famers. But those last couple of years of Earl Thomas, they kept playing and it got worse. You know, like the most recent taste in your mouth was not great. But boy, I mean, I think he might have been the most important guy in the Legion of Boom. I mean, he played that deep middle and allowed everybody else to do everything. Yeah.
What he did with his range, and he was clearly the best safety in the NFL, was like Ed Reed and then him. It's kind of like the Willis and Keuchly thing. And it's like, phenomenal. End of career really kind of taints that for me. And I would have to go back. I would have to go back and see how long he was at the top, because I think that's a huge key. Because like Patrick Willis is in the Hall, and he was a All-Pro every single year. Like he literally was there every single year, his entire career. Then he retired. For Earl Thomas, was it 4 years at the top? Was it 9 years at the top?
I think it's longer than that. Yeah.
I would have to go back.
I guess it's like 7 or 8. You know, like his whole stint was Seattle.
Yeah.
And even like the Ravens part didn't end well. You know, I mean, let's not let the last couple of crappy years taint it too much, because he was the best safety in the league for a while.
I think that hurts him.
The best. Yeah, it does.
But he probably belongs in that Terrell Suggs, like he's going to get in conversation. But end of career and how that ended and the weird off the field stuff kind of hurts him. But I would definitely put Thomas in over Lynch, over Matthews, over Vinatieri.
And frankly, there's some recent. You mentioned Lynch. I'm talking about John Lynch all of a sudden. John Lynch, Dawkins, Atwater, all those guys have gotten in recently. Thomas was a better player on his best day than all of those.
Yeah, I'll buy that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he was the best safety in the league for a while. I don't know that those guys ever were, you know, since like Polamalu and Reed, like you mentioned, you know.
Yeah, and so in comparison to Polamalu and Reed, he's right after them, or do you think he's that they're brothers? They're in the same team.
I think he's closer to them than he is John Lynch and Atwater, but he's behind those two.
Interesting. So
he's
clearly
kind of messy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he was with Texans at the end and Ravens. And didn't he have something off the field?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He had a lot of weird stuff off the field.
Yeah. It all ended straight, and his teammates hated him. And like it ended bad. Yeah. It shouldn't detract for a lot of years, you know.
So if now you're betting on the 5, which 5 get in?
Not my vote, but who I think gets in.
Yeah.
Keuchly, Eli. I'm going to say no on Yanda, even though I think he does. I'm going to say Gates. I'm going to cheat because I think Gates has to be one of the 5.
Okay, Gates is going to get back in. We haven't talked about the old, who is it? Like Torrey? No.
I don't even want to talk about those guys. Have been up forever.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Vinatieri and Suggs. This go round. So Thomas and Yanda wait. Yeah, but not long.
Okay.
But what's crazy in the Hall of Fame talk is pretty soon we have Ben, Breeze, like that huge no-brainer quarterback.
Like the group of quarterbacks alone that's going to come in is going to make it difficult. Like Yanda needs to get in now. Earl Thomas, Marshawn Lynch, those guys need to get in now because it's going to be even harder in the coming years.
You're not going to beat those guys out, right? You need to get in while the getting's good,
Thanks, everybody, for making this your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. For your second listen, make sure you check out one of the other 200 podcasts at Locked On. Your team, your sport is covered. Locked On Fantasy Football, Locked On Dynasty. You're getting ready for those fantasy drafts. Locked On Sports today, 24/7 streaming. Your favorite stories, your top stories around the NFL and beyond. And, of course, make sure you subscribe up here to Peacock and Williamson on YouTube and everywhere you listen to this podcast. Matt and I back next time right here, Peacock and Williamson.